Let's pick up where we kind of left off on the last figure. And yes, you can remove the neck on the Supergirl very easily because there's very little glue. So this is my second version of this figure, and this time I decided that I'm gonna use those abs because I saw somebody else do it. Well, I couldn't stay behind, and thank you very much for Bones at the Necro Zoo for the recommendation of using this piece on this figure. It is a little bit larger, but it does fit. You have to heat it up and then press it in there, and it will lock into place. Now, you'll have a very, very good sculpt on the front. However, on the back, on certain poses, you'll have to have that cape to hide those the protrusion that comes from that piece, from those abs. But other than that, they work really, really well. And the skin tone just happens to match. So that works out even better. Now, the peg on the bottom, I left it because I ended up using the briefs or the trunks from the Harley Quinn, and that worked out really well. So it doesn't have a gap. It actually has a really tight fit, and it looks good. Now, as far as the boots, I did not use the same method as you see here. Here I used styrene to extend the leg on the Harley Quinn legs. What I did on this new one, or the second version, is I used the actual boots from the legs and I cut them. I cut them to fit this ½ inch that I needed to bring it up to the proper height. And besides, they lock into the boots, the peg, just fine. So I super glued those on there. I ran a small nail up into the leg to give it some stability instead of using epoxy or the styrene. Then I slid the shrink tube over the leg just like I did on the last one, as you see right here. And then I ended up shrinking to fit that piece. Once it was cooled, I removed it and I cut the chevron at the top. Now these chevrons on this boot, or these boots, are a little bit deeper, and they do have a yellow trim, which I ended up using my Cricut cutter to cut some trim to, well, tape it on there. And because it's self-adhesive, I don't have to add glue, so it makes it really, really nice. I did, however, paint those boots and the shoes, or the boots, the bottom part of the boot, so that they both match, because they were two different reds. And it looks so much cleaner. So that's just another way of doing that. Again, I'm going to leave you with a little bit of video to show you the different approaches that I took to finding the hair that I needed for this face. It's the same face as the last one, but I added some makeup and just used a different hair sculpt. So let's move on to the cape because it's a little bit different, and this involves using bias tape. Now, bias tape is nothing more than a piece of very narrow cloth that is folded over twice and ironed out or pressed to make this very, very thin, well, tape. They call it bias tape. You can make your own if you wanted to. I ended up purchasing it just because it was only $2 and it saves me the trouble. Now, I'm not going to show you on the full cape because I've already done that. I'm going to use this scrap piece of material that ended up being extra left over from that cape. And I ended up using, well, a different material for the cape. I did not reuse the cape on this one. I didn't like that orange look for this. So this is a true red. It is cotton, and the bias tape is also cotton. And as you can see, as you open it up, you see the folds. Well, on those folds is what you want to add a double stick or iron-on tape in their fabric tape. And this is what's going to hold this onto the other fabric without any stitching. So cut a piece of that tape, the length that you need, and then you're going to take your scissors and even cut it more narrower than you see here. So only the determined width that you need. You can probably cut 3 pieces out of this, and then you'll have enough for both sides. So now once you cut this, you want to iron it onto one of those folds. Do the opposite as well. That way you have both of them ready to go. But you're only going to iron one side at a time. Now this is what it should look like when you have both sides in place. You can still fold it in half so that you can see where it's going to fall into. Peel off one half and then you'll be able to iron this onto your final product. Once you iron it out, well, it'll be easier once you iron it out. You can fold it over. This is one side that we removed. And you iron both sides into it. It'll look like this. You'll be able to have a small channel to run your wire. And then you can proceed to turn the corners. The corners is where it's a bit tricky because you do have to have the wire in place so that you can continue with one single unit of wire instead of joining it or soldering it. And you will have to practice this on a scrap piece before going onto your final product because you do not want to have a kinked corner. You want to be able to fold it and then iron that out or press it down as flat as you can. So off camera is how I'm going to do this. It's really difficult to do this on camera, but you want to make sure that your material is joined and ironed out correctly before you turn that corner. Make sure your wire is probably, well, you can use a 22 gauge or 24 gauge. Anything thinner than that, it's going to be, well, it's not going to be strong enough to hold the material. Now this is a decal that I cut on my Cricut cutter, and that's how I cut out the emblem. This is one here, as you can barely see the cutout that I haven't used. And as you can tell, by using one sheet, you can cut multiple emblems of what you need. I usually cut out more than one because I end up, well, ruining one or two. In this case, I ended up using part of the other emblems to make the cuffs on the arms or the hands, and then I also made the chevrons that are on the boots. You can tell I cut the bottom part of that emblem off and just use the narrower part. Now with a knife or a blade, you can peel away the parts that you want to expose. And this is so nice because it cuts it so precise and according to the size that you need. Obviously, this is just a scrap piece of material, but this gives you a full sense of what the finished product will look like. And again, practice on a piece of scrap material so that you don't ruin your final product. Once you feel confident enough to take on the final product, then you can do so and you'll have better results. Now, as far as installing the cape, again, you just remove the head And this time I super glued it in place. I did not run the wire all the way across because then it takes up space from that neck piece sitting down flush. So I ran the wire all the way through the cape as one unit, and I did not join it here. I only glued it at the edges, and reason is because that neck piece will fit in there tightly. That way, the pressure of that piece keeps the wire in place as well as the glue, and you'll be able to manipulate it as many times as you want, however you want. This is what makes this cape work. It's got one unit of wire all the way through the bottom and through the sides. Now that belt is also pleather, and do not fold the pleather over and glue it together because it's going to be too stiff and too thick. This is what it should look like in the end. So I've made my two favorite versions of Supergirl. You can make your own version, whichever one you like, using this figure. One's got a wired cape and skirt, the other only has wired cape. Now, keep in mind that these are only ideas for you to extend your creativity. I hope to see you here next time. Keep customizing.